And I hope that was really loud and distorted. Hi, welcome back. This is part 2 of the binge eating disorder help and weed addiction support video. As you can probably tell, I'm in my comfies because I wanted to be comfortable for this video because it is an uncomfortable topic. I made a compromise. It's not an easy topic. It's never going to be easy. Addiction. Bit of a background on me. I had an awful weed addiction this year, and it was very nicely paired with binge eating disorder, as you know if you've watched my last video. The very, very last steps for me in that journey, and this is a bit embarrassing, so do bear with me. Not everyone's situation is going to be as serious as this, but so in the last legs of my binge eating and weed addiction, I had got rid of all the food in the house. I put all of the food that was in the freezer, and it was all freezer burnt, just chucked it in the bin, and I had no weed. And I thought, right, that's me, I'm done. I had a very small amount of intention and a lot of action. So a lot of action was being made, but the amount of intention was... Of course I managed to get high that night. Of course I managed to find food. And you know what I did? I had no weed and I had no money to buy any weed. I was frantic. I was like, I need to get high, I need to get high, I need to get high. And I had got high every day for like a year and a half. Like, I needed to get high, I thought. And so I went over to my grinder and I got my little scraper and I scraped the crystals out of the bottom of that grinder, and I had no tobacco. I'd thrown away all my smoking materials. So I managed to find an old joint. I literally cut the end of the joint off and I had the roach there, and used a used roach. I had a crumpled up skin and I just peeled it in half. I put the end of this roach in and I sprinkled the crystals in. I had no tobacco with nothing, and I rolled it up and I managed to just twist the end. It was about this big, and yeah, that's how bad it got. But I didn't stop there. About half an hour later, I found myself sat on my kitchen floor eating out of the bin. Can we just take a moment here to realise how serious it is? I live in a first world country. If I've got enough money for drugs, I've got enough money for food. And I was so frantic about getting some food in my body that I sat on my kitchen floor and I ate frozen, freezer burnt, 6-month-old food out of the bin. Don't let yourself get to that point, because that is the hardest thing to look back on and just admit to myself and say it to a camera so that other people can see that. I'm not your average woman, but no one should be eating out of a bin. If you've even considered it, if you've even put your hand in the bin, I can't be the only one, and it's really hard to say to other people, but I'm just gonna be upfront and honest. Like, people do that shit. You might be watching this video and going, that dirty bitch. People do this shit. I did it. I am the cleanest, classiest woman, minus being an ex-prostitute. That's another thing. I am the most respectable woman. You would never look at me walking down the street and think, that girl's got an addiction. That girl eats out of a bin. I'm in such a good place. I thank my stars every day that I'm in such a good place. But if you're even on that level, even a little bit, let me help. So why does Mary Jane make binge eating disorder so fucking awful? Tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, is a cannabinoid in cannabis. I'm sure you know this. The thing about THC is that it binds with receptor type 1, CB1, and it promotes overeating. So CB1 lives in different areas of the body and different body tissues, and in each type of body tissue, it acts in a different way. Several of which ways can increase your appetite. Now you know. Public service announcement. CB1 can be found in the following areas. The basal ganglia, where it may enhance eating pleasure. The limbic forebrain, where it may enhance food palatability. The stomach and the small intestine, which both regulate ghrelin,
which is an appetite stimulating hormone that, speeds up your digestion.
So when THC and CB1 just rub up together, it activates a subset of neurons. These neurons can either decrease hunger or increase hunger. And recent studies on CB1 have found that synthetic forms of cannabis only activate the second one by increasing your hunger and just ignore the decreasing one. So, and most of us, especially if you're in the UK, you are not smoking that good shit sativa Californian weed, you're smoking skunk. Let's just face the facts, you don't get good weed here in the UK, very rarely. And if you're smoking that shit, this is gonna happen. Now, I have had the opportunity once in my life of smoking a beautiful sativa, and it didn't give me any kind of munchies. It was amazing. I had a beautiful night. I was laughing and giggling and I had a great time. But the odds of most of us getting hold of a really, really nice sativa and being able to differentiate what those feelings are and not acting out of a habitual pattern. So even if you do smoke sativa and you don't get the munchies, you kind of expect them to come and you might end up eating anyway out of habit. So if you've already got a binge eating disorder whilst you're sober, then smoking weed is only going to lower your inhibition and it's probably going to make the situation worse. That tug of war that you have with your ego and your morals, you have, before a binge or during a binge or after a binge, is completely obliterated by a couple puffs. It's not even a question like, am I going to do it? Am I not going to do it? You are. Yeah. You are. It's not a question. It's not a question. Brain doesn't have the capacity to think about your options anymore because the anxiety's gone. Thanks to the THC. Let's just move on to how to identify that you may have a binge eating disorder and a weed addiction. So here's a few things that I personally found myself doing and that I've seen other people do and that I've discussed with other people. Number one, sneaking extra food. When you go down for your munchies, do you find yourself shoveling like a ton of snacks in at the same time whilst you're preparing your munchies? Does that happen? Or you're making a sandwich and at the same time you're grabbing nuts out the cupboard and having juice and it doesn't stop. Shoveling sweets and chocolates into your pockets. I found myself doing this all the time. And I'd gone down to get a hot chocolate and I'd come upstairs with a bowl of muesli, but having eaten 2 bowls of muesli whilst I was making my hot chocolate. It's amazing how much food you can eat in the 60 seconds that the kettle is boiling. Number 2, opting to not eat out with friends or engage in social events because it could potentially cut into your ritual eating time, your ritual of getting high and then eating loads of food. Going out with friends for a meal doesn't seem as enjoyable as this. If you are in that kind of mental space at that time in your life, going out and doing that fun thing and spending quality time with people who love you doesn't seem as important as eating and getting high. It just doesn't. It's crazy for other people to understand. If you resonate with that, don't worry, I got you. I understand. I've been there. Another thing that I'm still actually having to unlearn is only being able to enjoy food when you're high. Because when you're sober, food doesn't taste as good anymore, especially if you compulsively get high. Found myself adding loads of salt and garlic and chili and loads of crazy spices that didn't really work together, adding them to my food, trying to enhance the flavor profile. But the reality is they would never taste the same as they did when I was high because I wasn't high and I was trying to recreate an experience that was entirely impossible in that moment. But I obviously didn't realize, thus I was adding loads of different flavors to try and create that taste sensation that you experience when you are high, when your taste buds are glowing. Number 3, eating really peculiar combinations of food and enjoying them. Sometimes you look in your cupboard and you go, oh, I like that, and I like that and that and that. None of those things create a food or a meal or a dish or a snack. But when you're binging, you can't get them quick enough. So how do you get all of these foods into your mouth quickly? Well, you eat them all together. and I found myself eating the strangest things. Not gonna list any here because you're gonna think I'm total weirdo, and I already told you I ate out of the bin. And number 4 is planning your binges hours beforehand, sometimes days beforehand, and obsessing over the foods that you're going to bring into that space when you finally get to sit down and have your food ritual. And actually having to decide which foods are going to provide the most mouthfeel satisfaction as possible is a real issue. We have got far too much time in this first world country to be worrying over issues like what food is going to feel best in my mouth whilst I'm binging. But apparently we do have the time to think about that, and this is genuinely something that I used to worry about. You might be thinking, Maeve, what the fuck is mouthfeel satisfaction? Well, I just kind of came up with it. I'm sure it's actually a thing. Choosing a particular food based on its texture rather than based on its nourishment. For example, a bowl of lentil dal and a flatbread is going to be just as satiating and just as nourishing, if not more nourishing, than a southern fried chicken burger. However, when you're high, and generally when you're not high, sober people who don't have a weed addiction do this too. They think that they're not going to be satiated by the bowl of lentil dal simply because of the texture. Now, something about eating a crunchy, crispy, fried food makes you think that you're going to be more satisfied by that meal, and you're not. Your body would just as happily digest a bowl of soup or a salad with protein and legumes than it's going to do when it's digesting bread and meat and oil and flour. I think it's just having too many options in this world that we think that we need to eat those foods before we would even look at eating a soup. When you're high, you may obsess over, but I want to eat these crisps, but these crisps taste better with this chocolate, and this chocolate bar tastes better than this chocolate bar, but this chocolate bar's got nuts, and I love eating crunchy food when I'm high. These obsessions can seriously bother people. Seriously. I used to think about this. Other people think about this too. Maybe you think about this. We've got far too much time on our hands. They're just gonna be a bit in your face there. And number 5 is the most important one, and that's promising yourself that you're not gonna do it again. I'm not gonna do it again. No, this is the last time. No. But because this is the last time, I guess I better make the most of this binge, right? Next time I'll only pick healthy munchies like apples and lettuce. But you won't. You know why? Because you made that decision whilst you were sober. And when you're high, you're not going to want apples and lettuce. Trust me. That foundation you laid down during that moment of clarity, and those are moments of clarity, they're just going to dissipate the second you smoke weed because you're lowering your inhibitions and you're not thinking with your conscious mind anymore. And then you blame yourself for not sticking to your word.
Ah, God, I did it again. I said I wasn't going to binge. I binged. I promised myself. I said last time was the last time.
But actually what you're doing is blaming yourself for not remembering words that actually no longer exist anymore. You're not conscious anymore. If you're not conscious, those thoughts do not exist. So you can't hold yourself accountable. Feeling guilty for not holding yourself accountable, it's not going to serve you. So what you need to start paying attention to before you start looking at your binge eating disorder is your weed consumption. You need to start looking at this first. Tackle the drug problem first, and then tackling the food problem is going to become a whole lot easier. Yeah, but Maeve, like, how do I stop smoking weed? Like, I need weed to sleep. The only thing that gets me going in the morning. It's what me and all my friends do. My mum smokes weed and I love smoking with her. My whole family smokes. It's just the culture I was raised in. Yada, 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 yada. I don't want to hear it. There's a million excuses as to why you can keep smoking weed, but why should you stop? The most important thing to recognize here is, who are you when you're high? And who have you become since you started smoking? So not just who you are when you're high and how you act when you're high, how do you act outside of that scenario? Who have you become? Because I'm sure you're super fun and upbeat when you're baked, but most of us are. But what does the rest of your life look like right now? Like, let's actually take a look at this right now. Get a pen and paper. Let's have a look. Are you working on your dreams? Are you? Are you really wholeheartedly working on your dreams right now? Are you a positive person to be around when you're sober? What do your day-to-day stories consist of? So when you talk about your life, what are you talking about? Are you always telling stories about being high or being high with your friend? Crazy dumb shit you did when you're high, or these deep meaningful conversations that you had when you were high? Are you active in your community? What's your social life like? Do you spend time with people who don't smoke? Are you working towards your passions? Are you driven? Are you in love? Are you on the ball? Have a look at your life right now. So outside of smoking and when you're not getting high, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing? So in a moment, I want you to pause this video and just play out this exercise. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine something. Have a look at your life right now. Try to view it as other people would view your life as well. So let's say you die tomorrow. It might happen. The news picks up on it. What is everyone going to be telling that reporter about you and about your last few months on this earth and what you've been doing with your life? When they look at your journals, when they look at your laptop, when they look at your bedroom, when they look at your house, when they look at your life, what are they going to assess your life was like? How are people going to say you spent your last precious moments on this earth? What is that newspaper article going to read? Pause this video. Imagine that scenario right now and imagine that newspaper article and then come back to me. So now you should have done a little self-assessment. Are you happy with that person? Who are you when you're not high? Who is that person? What do they do? How do they inspire people? How do they inspire themselves? How are they working towards their dreams? How are they driven? If you answer yes, then you must be a magical dragon who successfully balances a weed addiction and a binge eating disorder and a very prosperous, abundant lifestyle. And that's good for you. Then why are you here? If you answer no, then how are you going to change that? That potential that you have, you can harbour it daily. You can. It is possible for you. Or you can allow your addictions to rob your potential from you. And you can allow your addictions to rob your evenings and rob your mornings and rob the only time you have here on earth. And guess who's in charge of both of those scenarios? You. And it might not feel like an option actually, but guess what? We're not talking about class A drugs here. We're not talking about heroin. We're not talking about one of these things that you rely on religiously. We're talking about the kind of drug that helps you forget. It helps pull the wool over your eyes for a brief period of time. But guess what's still there when you come around? Fucking life. The worst part about weed withdrawal is not being able to quiet your ego any longer. It's not even the withdrawal. It's about not being able to quiet your damn ego. You actually have to face life now, and you have to face it alone with your personality. You have to develop a new life structure and give your life some meaning so that you're entertained all the time. A lot of people who get high think that getting high is a doing action. You don't feel like you've not done anything with the past 7 evenings because you got high every evening, but actually you weren't doing anything. You were just high and doing nothing. But because you were high, you felt like you were doing something, but you weren't. Living without the weed is the easy part. Living with yourself is the hard part. And especially the part of actually having to live with food, with your anxiety, and live with that mental state. Ugh. Yeah, it's not easy. But having a crutch on weed is not going to save you, I'm afraid. You can't just keep going and going and going and going and going, and eventually you won't have an addiction anymore, and eventually you'll get over your binge eating disorder, because that's not going to happen. Life doesn't just go away because you choose to close your eyes to it and you choose to pull the wool over your eyes every night. Life is still going to be there every fucking morning going, "Hi, hello, I'm back. You got to deal with me again. What are you going to do?" Some people can smoke and they never get munchies, and they eat normal amounts of food and they enjoy their lives. Brilliant. Good for them. That's not you, and that's not me. Do I love being high? Yes. Will I ever pick up a joint again? It's hard to say at this point in my life. I'm 21, but I'm telling you the God's honest truth right now when I tell you that the thought of putting a joint to my lips knocks me sick. I am physically sick to my stomach on that thought alone. Because the person I become when I smoke is not someone I ever want to be. Her life isn't worth living, actually. I just thought I could eat until I didn't exist anymore. I was so miserable and so depressed in that state that I would never put myself back in that position again. And I tell you what, fearing the end of your life is the scariest thing. Nothing else is scary. You think facing a binge eating disorder is scary? You think that facing your weed addiction is scary? It's not. Try facing the end of your life and then try to manage a binge eating disorder. I tell you what, it's like a walk in the park. So I make the choice to say no. Do you want a glass of wine, Maeve? No. No, thank you. Do you want a cigarette? No. No, thank you. Do you want a joint? Do you want to roll up? Do you want to smoke? Do you want to get high? Nope. No, thank you. I'm good. I'm doing me. I'm working hard. I know who I am. I know how to spend time on my own. I know how to spend time on my own and be sober and not have food. It's amazing because I deserve a good life. I know I do. And I choose to provide that for myself, and I give that to myself. I give myself the respect that I want, and I make sure that I feel those happy feelings that I used to reach out to weed to give me. I give those to myself now because I know I'm stronger than my addictions. My addictions don't control me. I control them. My addictions come from me. They are developed by me, and I can choose to keep them or I can choose to take them away and deal with them and not look at them. I have that choice. You have that choice too. What's more important to you? You've got to answer that question. What's more important, weed or your life? What's more important? Marijuana and food and compulsive overeating or your life? What are you going to choose? What are you going to choose? I can't make that decision for you. Nobody can make that decision for you. You've got to answer that one. So if anybody wants me to make a part 3, which is life after or during binge eating recovery and weed addiction recovery, if you want me to talk about how to deal with life after you've managed to just get through the first couple hurdles, and I will. Just drop it in the comment section below. I know I'm a bit in your face, but issues that are serious, I don't like to smile and giggle around because I don't view them as squishy issues that can be just dealt with willy-nilly. I think it's serious. But if you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, switch on the bell notification, and follow me on social media. I post daily on Instagram. I do Instagram TV quite often. I have a Facebook group. The Toilet Telly podcast is also out now, and I'll put all the links below. And there will be many more juicy topics to come. Thank you so much for watching. Peace and love, and have a brilliant new year.